And we kick off this evening with a look at the cinema.
I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
It's beautiful, beautiful cinema.
Cinema history come to life.
I found my solace in the small cinema I went to every Thursday night.
I'm a professor of cinema.
I go to the cinema for the stories.
There was no competition between the cinema and seminar.
I mean, it's not within the realm of conventional cinema.
And now,
here's Space and Johnson
with a cinema review.
It is Monday, September 18th, 8 EST, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Cinemaster's Reviews. We have two exciting movies we are reviewing this week. We have Kenneth Branagh's A Haunting in Venice, as well as the new Nicolas Cage starring movie, The Retirement Plan. Exciting show we have. And joining me to review our first movie, A Haunting in Venice, is returning guest we last saw him when we reviewed Beau is Afraid and Evil Dead Rise, Mr. Aaron J. Aaron, how are you doing tonight?
I'm great, Payson. We've been ready to get back on the show for a while. I'm a big fan of all your reviews. Definitely enjoyed talking about Beau is Afraid, and I'm surprisingly excited to talk about Haunting in Venice as well. So I was definitely knew I was going to love Beau is Afraid, but this is not as much of a Aaron movie for sure. And turns out that there's no such thing as that, but thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I say we jump right into our first movie we are reviewing. You alluded to it, and that is A Haunting in Venice. This is the third film in Kenneth Branagh's new Hercule Poirot trilogy. We've had many different Hercule Poirot adaptations in the past, but this is the third one from Kenneth Branagh. He both directs and stars as the lead detective. This one sees Hercule Poirot now retired in the titular city of Venice, and he is invited on Halloween to a seance at a spooky house. And while they are doing this seance, wouldn't you know it, a murder happens, and suddenly Hercule Poirot both needs to solve this murder and decide if his skepticism towards ghosts and spirits might be a little misfounded. Aaron, I'm not going to ask you your history with the entire character of Hercule Poirot, but what have been your histories with Kenneth Branagh's interpretations of this character in the past, with both Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile?
So I have watched Murder on the Orient Express, and like most people, at least I have talked to, I thought it was fine. It was solid, but to be honest, I am a 70s man, so the original for me, still, it was hard for me to get out of that. And Death on the Nile was a COVID movie. It was one of the 700 movies I watched during COVID, and I think I might have started and then stopped watching it. So, and then I kind of just was this seems a little bit forgettable. And with Haunting in Venice, I didn't really have it on my radar until I knew it was coming out, and the horror element, I'm a big horror guy, so I was kind of curious about that. I thought that would add to the mystery for me. And so I was going into this movie with decent expectations, but also, wasn't exactly sure if it would be my thing or not. I wasn't expecting to be scared by this or anything like that. So that wasn't why the horror elements interested me. We'll talk about it later. I think how it helped or hurt it. But yeah, no, this is definitely a movie that before the last couple of weeks wasn't on my radar even. And Kenneth Branagh in general, his movies are not my thing, if I'm honest. I wanted to like Belfast. I was this is going to be the kind of, and I respected Belfast, but that's not always what you want to hear out of a movie you watch, is that you respected it. Thor, no. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, there's many other ones that just for me, really, I was regardless, I liked how the cast wasn't so reliable on all these names I knew also, but I also had heard of a few people, but I liked how it wasn't just everybody's because that to me felt distracting in both the first two movies from what I remember.
No, yeah. Like you, I've seen those first two movies, and with Murder on the Orient Express, like you, I thought it was fine. I thought it was a decent telling of that story. But like you, I do prefer the 70s version more. It's actually funny. I prefer the 70s version more, with the exception of I think Kenneth Branagh is a better Hercule Poirot than Albert Finney. I think if you take the cast of the original Murder on the Orient Express but put Kenneth Branagh as the detective, I think you have that perfect movie. And Death in the Nile, I've never actually seen the original Death in the Nile. I like Death in the Nile a little bit more just because I think it's a more fun mystery, and I think setting it in Egypt, setting it on the boat, I think just adds like a little bit more stakes. And coming into this movie, like you, I saw the trailers and I was like, this definitely has more of a horror feel to it. Obviously, The Haunting of Venice is not as famous of a story as those other two. And something I really, really enjoyed about this movie, as opposed to the first two, which have a little bit more of a comedic tone to their mystery, this one really strips that down to essentially make the stakes a little bit more heavy and make you take the movie a lot more seriously. And I really appreciated that. I think of those first two where like the characters are always making these little quips, and there's much less of that in this movie, which only adds to the atmosphere and to the mood that this movie does need to create. Because with it being a horror movie, you want to be a little bit more, maybe not necessarily like scared, but you want to be a little bit more chilled while you're watching it. And I think this movie does a really good job with how it subdues its tone. What did you think about just its tone, about its tonal style in that way?
I agree completely. And I was really concerned when I saw Tina Fey was in the cast, because I'm like, oh, this is like to lighten up the like heavy death talk. And, you know, I really like appreciate how she acts in this movie. For one, she's really great. Honestly, there's not a weak link in the cast to me. I think they all show up, including the kid, who, you know, we know that's never a guarantee at all. But yeah, I like how it kind of doesn't, it does have some macabre humor, which macabre humor works really well for me because you can transition into like the deeper aspects right from and it's not like a MCU movie where there's just too many quips and like we're trying to get back to like a serious moment the next time. And there's a really great shot later in the movie involving the water and a character being dragged down that I just think is like a beautiful shot, like and just like a beautiful like encompassing of like kind of death and the finality of it and the darkness of it as he's being dragged under the water. You know, and it's just, yeah, like I love the tone of the movie all the way around. It didn't feel like, you know, he didn't know what he was doing with the horror elements at all, you know. And even though it was PG-13, I think that did, you know, the movie credit, because if it was R, it just would have been too much. And
I agree, yeah.
And like the PG-13 like doesn't work in the horror genre very often, but when it does, it really can work, and it really works here. The movie started out, and you know, it just kind of kept growing on me as it went, and you know, like I wasn't as concerned with the overall mystery as like the more like the examination of the characters, like looking at their own biases or their own beliefs and everything. I thought that was like such an awesome surprise with this movie, how psychological it was.
No, yeah, I think with this having a little bit more of a subdued tone, I think one of the things you do lose is during those like interview segments, they're not necessarily as fun as they were in the first two, but in a way, like, while it took a little bit of me like getting used to, I did just love how you really got into like the psychological aspects, like you said, of all of these characters and how they do just both their like feelings of the occult and of spirits in general, which is a big theme of this movie. Something that I think this movie does a really great job is it doesn't try to be necessarily scary, but it tries to be gothic. And that is why I think it gets away with the PG-13 nature, is because it's not trying to like really disturb you, but it's just trying to set like a really solid mood. You tackled the cast for a second. I think the cast, while not as showy as the other two films, I think is just as effective. Yeah, like you said, Tina Fey is in this movie, and I think she's a super underrated, like, dramatic actress. Like, she's I guess, kind of the comedic relief of this movie, but she's really not going for, like, a joke per minute. She's just the one person in this movie that isn't, like, taking it, like, super seriously. We learn that her character is a writer and is someone who is really just there to, like, kind of get, like, a story. So you kind of have this, like, feeling of, you have this feeling of like, oh, she's just there for money. But as the movie goes on, she slowly, like Hercule Poirot, starts to get more invested in the mystery as well. Yeah, like you said, a child actor is not always a great guarantee, but I think Jude Hill did a really, really great job. But of the supporting cast, I think Jamie Dornan gives a great performance. I think Michelle Yeoh gives a great performance. But I think the standout of the cast is Kelly Riley.
Yeah, I think Kelly Riley's great, and Kyle Allen, who could just double for Brad Pitt. Like, he really could, and I think Kyle Allen's going to become huge eventually.
No, yeah.
He has the look, and he was hilarious also, just from how his character, like, was so ridiculous. Whether it was, like, intentional or not, his character just, like, he was such an ass that, like, I just couldn't help but, like, wait for, like, something to happen to him. This cast was great, though. I loved not just instantly recognizing everybody besides Tina Fey.
Yeah, I wish I could get more into like the character specifics, but I don't want to with this being a murder mystery. I don't want to spoil who the killer is. I don't even really want to spoil who the person who was killed. I'll say this: if you've seen the trailers, someone in the trailer is revealed to be the main person that is killed, but we're not going to go into that because I do think that is part of the main plot of this movie. But yeah, I really do think this cast is great. And once again, I think it's all anchored by a phenomenal performance, once again, by Kenneth Branagh as Hercule Poirot. I love how this movie realistically sets up, like, Hercule Poirot would not be someone that believes in ghosts. Like, this is someone who is always trying to look at something from an analytical mind. He's trying to solve things. And in no way would this be someone who's like, oh, yeah, ghosts totally exist. Because he'd be trying to find the reasoning for that. And I love how, as the movie keeps going on, even he's like, as he's trying to find explanations for everything, he's like, well, maybe they do exist, maybe they don't. And I don't want to say what happens in it, but I do love that he does go on an arc, because at the beginning of this movie, he's retired. He's essentially like, I'm done with mysteries. I don't need to be doing this. And by the end, all I will say is this is a franchise, so you got to find a way to keep going. And I think it gets to a realistic arc with his character. What did you think about Kenneth Branagh's performance in this movie?
Yeah, because I didn't remember Death on the Nile too much, like, I kind of appreciate that it didn't rely on that. I think that Kenneth Branagh was kind of realistic with, this might be someone's first Hercule Poirot movie. And while also, if you've watched them all, you can have some connection, some recognition. And I think that's just like a really like impressive job there, because you understand Hercule, whether this is your first movie you've seen of it or it's the third one you've seen of it. And like, you just see he's tired of it all. He's tired of the fanfare. He's tired of all the people asking him to solve who killed his mom, who killed their. It's like, what can a person say to Hercule Poirot at this point that he's gonna be like, oh, I must get involved with it? Like, oh, your family died. Okay. Like, just get into, like, he's so jaded from like his, from the work he's done. So yeah, no, I really liked his role. It's just, it's like the classic skeptic versus the ghost hunter type of thing. But it wasn't done in such a cliche way. It felt so natural and real. Like, that's throughout this movie with the, the weird aspects of it. It still felt so believable throughout. And like, you could really picture yourself in this type of situation if you were him. So yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, I just love those first scenes where he first meets Michelle Yeoh's character, who's like the clairvoyant, like psychic type.
She's so good at
and she comes in and she's all like big and like she's into these spirits, and Hercule Poirot is having none of it. Mm-hmm. Like, the second he shows up, he's like, can we please go? Like, I don't want to have any part of this. And I think that was really, really fun. Something that love his films or hate his films. Kenneth Branagh is someone I don't always love his movies like you do. I really, really love Belfast, but like you, I also was like not a big fan of the first Thor. I definitely put that at the lower end of the MCU. But something I will always appreciate about his films is they always have a grand look to them. Yes. And they always, and like, especially when it comes to like the technical aspects. I think this movie has some really great technical aspects, and some I definitely think could have been improved. Some of the pluses are the production design and the sets. Like, the way how this movie shoots Italy looks incredible. I believe it was shot on location, and that makes me really happy, because with Death on the Nile, like, I think one of the criticisms I have with that movie is you can tell a lot of the establishing shots in Egypt were fake, and you can very clearly tell, like, okay, that was a green screen, that was a green screen. Yes. This movie does not have that issue, and I really want to commend that. If there was something I do I did have an issue with. I do think the way it uses like the over reliance on Dutch angles and certain camera angles did eventually like start to like bother me with how it was trying to like really get under your skin. And at certain points I was like, okay, I get it, especially during the final act when like we're really in like the high stakes. I was like, okay, can we like have a little bit
Staring
more?
at the camera.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. Can we please just like get one straight shot? But like for the most part, I did definitely find the technical aspects good, but there were some issues I did have. What did you think about the technical aspects of this movie, Aaron?
I like when directors have fun with the camera. So like there was like an inverted shot that wasn't quite the Ari Aster inverted shot in the movie that I really did like, and like there it didn't bother me as much. I actually kind of like the style. I was just so happy to not see a CGI'd mansion and things like that.
Yeah,
it was like so. I was so worried that it was just going to look too clean and cleaned up, and they really like seemed like they minimalized what they did with that and those types of occurrences, which I appreciated. And yeah, I mean, you know, I think it added a little bit of fun to the movie. So it actually didn't bother me. Even the Dutch, I didn't really even notice the Dutch angles. Maybe on a rewatch with you pointing it out, I would now, but I didn't particularly notice it. I kind of like when the director has a little bit of fun. So that's not as much of a critique for me with this movie or in general usually. So, and I really like the music also used in this movie because it wasn't so distracting. It was very subtle, which again, you know, I appreciate. It wasn't just slammed on organs the whole time, like grating on me.
Yeah, this movie composed by Hildur Guðnadóttir, who I absolutely love. She's the person that composed Tar. She composed Joker. She composed Women Talking. Has like really making her name for herself. But yeah, like you said, the score is not like in your face like in some of those other movies. It's very much like in the background. It's really just there to establish a mood, which I think when you are, depending on the movie you are making, I do think that can be helpful at points. Obviously, I think a movie like No Country for Old Men, which has barely any score to it, and I think that really helps because you're really just like hearing the noises of the desert or just hearing like the noise of like a motel, and only adds the tension there. And I do think that is really, really helped there. Something I did want to tackle is the mystery in this film. The mystery is not like quite as straightforward as the other two films. Like the other two films are very much like someone dies, we got to figure out who killed them. In this movie, like we start off with, oh, there was a death like semi recently, and then something else happens, and slowly things start to happen. In a way, it kind of got a little convoluted for me. Were you able to like keep track of everything that was going on? And did you think the mystery was as strong as the other two movies?
Yeah, I would say it was like, for even though it was a murder mystery, it's almost like the mystery of the actual murders was not the point of the movie. It was more like the mystery of, you know, what is natural or what is supernatural, what is, you know, what really is death. It was more the mysteries of that to me that were interesting, to where like I almost didn't care about solving the mystery. I was just like wanted to see how the characters were going to react to the situation and the themes that were presented by being stuck in this. So like for me, like that is it probably was the weakest mystery of the three of them in a way, and it was pretty convoluted. And I think what that allowed is for you to get to know the characters a lot more and kind of their feelings about life. And it's just like I just wasn't expecting that much of a philosophical edge to this movie, and I really, really appreciate that. So I know it's like a murder mystery, but I didn't care like at all. So maybe that's a bad thing about the movie. Maybe they didn't do a good job of getting me to care about it enough. But I was like, you know, like I'm not here for the mystery. I'm here for the rest of it almost.
Yeah, for me, I think I kind of view that as like a double-edged sword. Like you said, I do think it is very fun that you are just really interested in like how these characters are reacting to everything. Like all of the characters have a lot of history with like the entire mansion and the entire history of what's going on. But at the same time, like you said, I do kind of think like, but I am watching a murder mystery. I do want to be invested in like, oh man, what did happen? Why did this happen? And I think the fact that was there, I think that did keep, I do kind of view that as a pretty big hindrance for me, but I totally understand if the movie did win you over at a point. And I do think it did for me. I did like this movie. I totally understand why that wouldn't really be like a huge, huge issue. Aaron, before we head into final scores, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to bring up?
No, like again, there's just a shot towards the end of the movie involving water that, like, to me is like, yes, it's been done before in other movies in some way, but it was just really a beautiful, like, haunting, like, truly haunting shot. And like, this is a great October movie as well. So like, I think that's the reason it came out now, so it can be on streaming by Halloween, and a few movies I think have taken that approach. We've seen Cobweb, I think, also did that because that literally had Halloween throughout it, and now it's coming out, and it came out in July. And this movie came out in September. It's like, why is this coming out now? But I think this would be a fun movie to cozy up in, like, a fall night and, just watch. And I don't think a ton of it would be taken away. But I was glad I got to see it in the theater, because for a lot of dark movies, like Nun 2, for example, you can't see anything when it gets dark, right? Even when you're in the theater and they're like, oh, that's the horror of it. This movie was plenty dark and you could still see everything. So like, it's just like, yeah, I just, in the atmosphere for me, I'm more of a journey type of viewer than a destination kind of viewer, where I don't really care about the endings of a lot of movies as long as I'm having a great time along the way. And then if the ending's great as well, that's good, but it's not going to make or break it. So kind of depending, I'm more of a journey. If you're more of a destination, like I need to know a mystery, it might really kind of bore you in some ways, because they're going to at times like just kind of more think about the aspects of the murder than the murder itself. So
I think that's really, really succinctly put. Yeah, for the most part, I do tend to be a, like, 80% of the movie. I am mainly more about the journey person, and 20% is the destination.
Yeah.
Where, like, I do think landing the plane does matter to me, but for the most part, if you do make like a really satisfying adventure, normally that can at times be enough for me.
Yeah.
But Aaron, we do review movies here on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes. 0 is awful, absolutely abhorrent, truly just like, what did I just watch sort of movie. And 10 is an all-timer, one that reminds you why you love movies in the first place. If you were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, what would you give A Haunting in Venice?
Yeah, I'd give this an 8, honestly, and a very surprising 8. Going in, like, I try not to judge movies going in, but going in, I was expecting maybe a 6, 6.5 type, about what I had for the other movies. But it really, really surprised me with the cast. I have a few new favorite actors that I'm like, I always love when I discover a couple people I didn't really know about, and I'm like, oh, I get to like kind of check out when Kyle Allen has another movie, when Jude has another movie. Like, it's cool to find that. And yeah, it was just really, really solid. I didn't have any glaring things I disliked or took me out of the movie. I was interested from the beginning. I'm kind of surprised to see some people saying they were kind of bored with it, because like, I just did not find it to be boring at all. So, yeah. And again, it didn't remind me of anything else I had seen, which, honestly, especially Murder on the Orient Express, reminded me of other movies when I saw it. And this just felt a lot more original, while taking a story that's lesser known from Agatha Christie. And I love Agatha Christie movies also. I'm starting to realize, like, See How They Run was another one that I just
a lot of fun.
Adore that movie. And it's like, oh, maybe I do like these movies more, because I'd always been like, I don't care about destinations as much. But so I think it was just a really well done overall movie, and no one in the cast I was like rolling my eyes at, which is really nice in a movie where it has plenty of potential for it. So I didn't think it was trying to be too smart for it either. I really think it stayed within itself while making a really complete story for me.
Absolutely. 8.0 from Aaron. That is a great score. I think I'm just going to go slightly lower than you, and I'm going to give it a 7.5. This is overall a really, really good mystery to me. I think Kenneth Branagh's really like showing how much love he has for these types of movies, and I'm very happy that he is giving one of these, like, it seems every year and a half, and I think theaters are better for that. Like, I love having like these mid-budget franchises like this. Yeah, like you said, the cast is a lot of fun. It's not as showy as other casts, but yeah, like you said, I'm like, my big takeaway was I'm not someone who watches Yellowstone, but I hear Kelly Riley is phenomenal in Yellowstone, and now I'm like, please just put her in more movies after watching this movie. And yeah, like you said, Kyle Allen is wonderful. I just love putting Hercule Poirot in different like locations and having him like solve mysteries with different casts. Like you, I'm also a fairly big Agatha Christie film fan. If anyone has not seen a phenomenal classic film, is Billy Wilder's Witness for the Prosecution, which is also based on an Agatha Christie novel. Such a good movie. Especially if you love courtroom dramas, find that movie is one of the most accessible classic films I think I could ever recommend to anyone. And yeah, Haunting in Venice. Like if we're gonna get more of these mystery movies, I'm all for it. So yeah, 7.5 from me, 8.0 from Aaron. I think we both recommend if you can go see this in the theaters, especially to like really appreciate the technical aspects. Aaron, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Before you head off, and before I jump into the second review, is there anything you want to plug or promote?
Just my Letterboxd. Let me catch up to my fiance, who has passed me an average likes on every Letterboxd review at this point, and she's been on for like 3 months. It's like her, like I get like 5, and I'm like, woo, 5, and she's like, oh, I got 12. It's good. She's killing it. So I'm going to plug Abby's Letterboxd actually because she doesn't need the help, but A with 3 B's, BBY, Road with a 0 instead of an O. So even though she has this crazy name, she's still getting all these likes, all these follows. Check out Abby's reviews. They are really well done. She's got great taste as well. She saw the movie with me. She also was a fan of it, and she's a huge, huge horror fan. So she was going in a little bit with the horror arms folded and still enjoyed it. And yeah, I can't wait to hear your review for The Retirement Plan. I'm getting ready to see it tomorrow. You know, I'm a Nick Cage man.
Oh,
I just didn't have time this weekend, but it looks outstanding. And yeah, great show as always. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much, Aaron, and I hope you have a great night.
Have a great night, Payson.
Thank you once again, Aaron, for joining me. It's always a pleasure to talk about movies. He's one of my favorite people in this community. We're going to be jumping right into our second review of the night, and that is The Retirement Plan, this directed by Tim Brown. This movie is about a government conspiracy with a guy who's essentially been tasked with being a double agent to essentially find a flash drive that has fallen into the hands of criminals. And he is able to find this flash drive, gives it to his girlfriend, and she ends up giving it to his wife. She ends up giving it to her daughter and sending her daughter to the Cayman Islands to live with her grandpa. And her grandpa is played by Nicolas Cage. The main bad guy, his name is Donnie, played by Jackie Earle Haley, is very upset about this, so he sends some of his goons in order to try and find the flash drive and essentially take Nicolas Cage's character out. But little does he know that Nicolas Cage's character is an ex-assassin who's been living in the Cayman Islands for about 15, 20 years, and it's not going to be as easy as you think to take him down. Now, everything I said about this movie when it comes to the whole like government conspiracy thing, there are things going on back in DC, things going on back in Miami. We essentially realize that there are certain double agents in Washington DC. I'm just gonna say the big downside of this movie, so that way I can just talk about everything I like beforehand. Everything involving like the government in this movie, I do not care about, and I could have done without like everything involving like, oh, why do we need this flash drive? And what are the secrets that this flash drive contains? All that I've just found like a little boring. And whenever we're talking about that, I kind of check out. You eventually realize that Cage's character, Matt, he has allies in the government. You don't really care too much about that. And when you see him like calling them and you learn that he kind of has a history with them, you kind of check out a little and you're like, okay, can we just get back to the action? Because when we get to the action, when this movie wants to be just like a stupid, fun, over-the-top Nicolas Cage movie where you're watching old 60-year-old Nicolas Cage kick all these like bad guys' asses, that is when this movie is so much fun. Nicolas Cage, unhinged Nicolas Cage, which is what we give in this movie, is always a plus. When Cage's character is first introduced to his granddaughter, he's like sleeping in his retirement home, and we learn that he hasn't really had like human interaction for like 10 years now, and that is just, and like he comes in with this long gray hair. All of that is so much fun, and just when you see him fighting these guys, and when you see him like killing people with like a flare gun or like hanging them in certain scenes, all of that is super entertaining. The editing of this movie is something that I think really needs to be applauded. Whenever a character is introduced, you get a cool zoom in on them, you get a new colorized filter, and then you just get their character name. So the movie definitely has like that sort of style to it. So shout out to Tim Brown. He definitely knows how to direct his action. Movie has an awesome supporting cast. Like I said, Jackie Earle Haley plays the villain. He's like this like sniveling like rat sort of bad guy who's like always like on the verge of feeling like he's gonna get a bullet in his head because he works for the higher powers. And so he just really needs to have this flash drive. Ron Perlman plays like his like right hand man, and I think he might be like the highlight of this movie. There's a scene where Ron Perlman does kidnap Nicolas Cage's daughter, and these scenes can be very, very like it feels like that could be disturbing at points because Jackie Earle Haley just says, "Hey, Bobo," which is Ron Perlman's character, "you got to kill this. You got to kill this character after we're done using her." Which essentially like after they get the flash drive, just dispose of her. And you can kind of see like Bobo is like, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to do that? But like the scenes that Bobo has with Cage's granddaughter are so much fun, just with how he treats her. Like he's not like disrespectful to her by any means. He's always like, all right, do you want to go get some pizza? And they just have like these weird conversations. Like his granddaughter is like, why are you the bad guy? And he's just like, well, I always was on this side. So everything with Perlman and Cage's granddaughter, I absolutely love in this movie. Perlman is so good as playing like this stoic, like, I'm not sure I really like what I'm doing, but I guess I got to do it sort of character. And yeah, Perlman is really, really funny there, which is good because like those scenes could be so uncomfortable because you know that like, oh man, but like after Bobo gets the flash drive, he's probably going to dispose of his granddaughter, and it was really nice that that it never really got to like those disturbing scenes. Talia Campbell plays Sarah, who is Nicolas Cage's granddaughter. She is very, very good in the movie. Yeah, like I said, the entire supporting cast. Later in the movie, we learned that Ernie Hudson was at one point a military friend of Matt, which is Nicolas Cage's character, and they have a lot of fun interactions. There's a really, really cool action scene towards the middle of this movie on Ernie Hudson's boat, where a bunch of the bad guys are surrounding Cage and Hudson, and they have limited weapons, and they have to just sort of fend off about it. I really do think something that I think this movie just knows is it knows what the audience wants, and that is a dumb action movie. Like, does it have those like government conspiracy things? Yes, but I think in the end, I think what helps this movie, and I think what helps it get to that like level of greatness for me, is it doesn't even matter about that in the end. Like, we learn in the end with who the flash drive ends up with, it's technically a good guy, but it's someone who's going to use the flash drive for selfish motives. And the movie's just sort of like, okay, you can do that. Like, we care about Nicolas Cage's character. We care about him reconnecting with his daughter and with his granddaughter, and I think that's why we're there for it. And I think the movie just having its priorities in check is what helps it get to that great level. The action, for the most part, is pretty good. There are some weird moments, and I don't know why it does this, where it does like slow down the frame rate of the movie just to let us see like all the action, which I appreciate that it does that to let us see what's going on. But at the same time, it's always distracting in a movie where it does like slow down the action to where you're having just normal 20 frames per second, and then it slows to like 16 frames per second. We're like, why is it slowing down like this? What is this with this weird effect? And normally if that was for like a stylistic point of view, I could totally understand, but I don't think that's what it was. At least that's not what was conveyed to me as the watcher, so that was a little bit confusing. But yeah, if I were to review this movie on a scale of 0 to 10, I'm going to give it an 8. This is just a really fun, entertaining, over-the-top action movie. It gets bloody when it needs to, which I think when you're watching an R-rated action movie, I think you really do kind of want that. It is a fun like action comedy. Like I do think its humor is pretty fun. Nicolas Cage knows just the right amount of energy to bring, which for Cage is a lot. And as someone who's a fan of over-the-top Nicolas Cage, I always think is a plus. If you can, I would recommend going to see this in theaters. I think it's a lot of fun, and the second this movie comes on streaming, if you don't see it in theaters, watch it, because you are going to have a blast of an afternoon. So yeah, thank you all for watching this week. 35 minutes. I feel like I'm starting to get like more and more concise with how I feel about these. So I'm really just let me know if you like the shorter reviews like this. Like I know when I first started, 2 reviews would take me like 55 minutes. So I'm happy I'm starting to get this down to a little bit more concise feelings as long as I get my thoughts out and you know how I feel about the movies. Next week we are going to be reviewing The Expendables 4 as well as Expendables 4 is the one major wide release. I believe there's another wide release, so I'm going to check that. But yeah, that should be a pretty fun episode. Thank you all for watching. Remember to like this video and remember to subscribe to the video store. It really helps us out a lot. Aaron is one of the writers on Trivia League Unlimited, which is one of the shows we have on our channel, which is sort of the video store's trivia show. It's not necessarily like a full-on video store show, but we do host it, and we really do appreciate what John, Bill, Aaron, and Will all do over there. Next Thursday, not this Thursday, but next Thursday, we do have another episode of the Video Store Movie Club. We're going to be covering the movies of Stephen Chow. We're going to be watching Shaolin Soccer, Kung Fu Hustle, and The Mermaid. So if you have the chance to watch any of those movies, come watch them, because me, Mike, and Nazari will be having a really fun discussion on those. But yeah, that is about it. Thank you all for watching, and just remember, until next time, watch more movies.
And the award for most vapid film review of the century goes to...
Okay, movie review. Okay, I thought it was beauty.
And he's now in cinema hell, where one day we'll all be reunited.
This is me at the Regal Cinema crying as I did through much of the film.